Lady stood at the window of her family's ancient tower and watched the ships descend through the purple clouds of her. Her hands were steady, but her heart was not. Today, she would meet the man she was meant to marry. A human. The people had ruled these stars for 10,000 years. They were tall and graceful, with skin that shimmered like oil on water. Their warriors had conquered 100 worlds. Their poets had written songs that made other species weep. And now, after a long and bloody war with the humans, they had signed a treaty of peace. Was part of that treaty a bride for a human groom, a symbol of unity between two peoples who had spent decades killing each other. Her mother had wept when the news came. Her father had simply nodded and poured himself another drink. The family had fallen far from their former glory. They had no ships, no armies, no political power. They had only their name and their daughters. Was the third daughter, the expendable one. She turned from the window and looked at herself in the mirror. She had prepared carefully. Her gown was silver and blue, the colors of her house. Her long dark hair was braided with small crystals that caught the light. She looked beautiful. She looked like a sacrifice. The shuttle landed in the courtyard below, walked down the winding stairs of the tower, each step feeling heavier than the last. Her sisters watched from the shadows, their faces full of pity and relief. They were glad it was not them. The courtyard doors opened, and a group of humans walked in. Had seen humans before, but only in war footage. They were smaller than her people, softer looking, with flat skin in various shades of brown and pink. They seemed fragile. It was strange to think that these creatures had fought the Empire to a standstill. A human diplomat stepped forward and began speaking about the great honor of this union, the hope for lasting peace, the bright future ahead. Barely listened. She was looking at the man standing behind the diplomat, her future husband. He was not what she had expected. He was average height for a human, with short brown hair that was going gray at the edges. His face was plain and weathered, like a farmer who had spent too many years under the sun. He wore simple dark clothes with no decorations or medals. His hands were rough with calluses. He stood quietly, watching everything with calm brown eyes. Felt her heart sink. She had hoped for a warrior, someone whose strength might bring honor to her fallen house. She had hoped for a diplomat, someone whose influence might restore her family's position. Instead, she had been given this. A nobody, a commoner, a man who looked like he belonged in a field, not a palace. The diplomat finished his speech and gestured toward the plain man. "May I present Elias, your intended husband?" Elias stepped forward and bowed. It was not the deep bow of a servant or the stiff bow of a soldier. It was something in between, natural and unforced. When he stood up, he smiled at her. It was a gentle smile, full of kindness and perhaps a little sadness. "Lady," he said, his voice was soft and low, "thank you for agreeing to this. I know it cannot be easy." Blinked, she had prepared herself for arrogance or coldness. She had not prepared for sympathy. "It is my duty," she said, keeping her voice formal. "Duty is a heavy thing to carry," Elias said. "I hope I can help make it lighter." Over the following days, learned more about her future husband, and each thing she learned confused her more. He was not a soldier. He was not a diplomat. He was, as far as she could tell, a gardener. He had spent the last 20 years growing food and flowers on a quiet human colony. He had no titles, no wealth, no family connections. He was exactly what he appeared to be, a simple, quiet man. She did not understand. The peace treaty had called for a marriage between noble houses. Why had the humans sent this person? Was it an insult? Did they think so little of the family that they would offer a commoner as a groom? But when she watched Elias, she could not find any mockery in him. He was polite to everyone, from the highest lords to the lowest servants. He asked questions about food, music, and customs, and he listened carefully to the answers. He remembered the names of every servant in the house. He helped the kitchen staff carry heavy pots. He spent hours in the neglected gardens of the estate, pulling weeds and planting seeds. One evening found him sitting alone in the garden, looking up at the 3 moons of her world. She sat down beside him, keeping a proper distance between them. "You truly were a gardener," she said. "I thought perhaps it was a story." Elias nodded. "For many years now, I find peace in growing things." "And before that?" Something flickered in his eyes, a shadow that came and went so quickly she almost missed it. "Before that, I was something else, something I did not want to be anymore." He did not explain further, and she did not ask. They sat in silence, watching the moons rise. The wedding was held 1 week later. It was a small ceremony, much smaller than's family deserved. Only a few distant relatives attended. The great houses of the empire sent polite messages but did not come in person. Humiliation was complete. But Elias seemed to notice none of it. He spoke his vows clearly and honestly. When he placed his hand over hers in the traditional gesture of bonding, his touch was warm and steady. After the ceremony, he spent an hour talking with her elderly grandmother, who had not spoken to anyone in years. By the end of the conversation, the old woman was laughing. At the reception, stood alone near the window, watching her husband move through the small crowd. She felt hollow. This was her life now, married to a gardener, forgotten by her people. A voice spoke beside her. Fascinating choice the humans made. She turned to see General, one of the few military leaders who had attended. He was old now, from a dozen wars, but his eyes were still sharp. He was watching Elias with a strange expression. "You know him?" asked. The general's jaw tightened. "I know of him. I never thought I would see him in person." "He is a gardener." The general let out a short, harsh laugh. "Is that what he told you?" Before could ask more, the general turned to face her. His expression was serious, almost afraid. It was unsettling to see fear in the eyes of a man who had faced death 100 times. "Lady," he said quietly, "do you know who you have married?" She shook her head. The general looked back at Elias, who was now helping a servant clean up a spilled drink. "Then I suggest you find out, before someone else does." He walked away without another word, leaving alone with her questions and a growing sense that her quiet husband was not quiet at all. 6 months passed on the garden world and found herself changing in ways she did not expect. Life with Elias was quiet. He rose before the sun each morning and went to work in the gardens. He had transformed the neglected grounds of the estate into something beautiful. Flowers bloomed in colors had never seen. Vegetables grew fat and healthy. Fruit trees that had been dead for years somehow came back to life under his care. The servants whispered that he had magic in his hands. Watched him work sometimes from the window of her room. He moved with a patience she did not understand. He would spend an entire morning on a single row of plants, checking each one, removing sick leaves, adjusting the soil. He talked to the plants as he worked, though she could never hear what he said. In the evenings he cooked. This had shocked her at first. On worlds, nobles did not prepare their own food, but Elias seemed to enjoy it. He made dishes from old earth recipes, strange combinations of ingredients that somehow tasted wonderful. He always made enough for the servants too, and he sat with them at the kitchen table, laughing and sharing stories. Slowly, without meaning to, began to join him. She told herself she was just being polite. A wife should spend time with her husband. But the truth was simpler. She liked being around him. He made her feel calm. He asked about her day, her thoughts, her childhood dreams. He remembered everything she told him. When she mentioned once that she had loved a certain flower as a child, he planted an entire row of them outside her window. He never touched her without permission. He never demanded anything from her. He seemed perfectly content to simply share space with her, to sit beside her in comfortable silence, to make her laugh with gentle jokes. One evening, as they sat together in the garden watching the sunset, realized that she was happy. The thought surprised her so much that she almost laughed out loud. She, the disgraced daughter of a fallen house, married to a human commoner in a political arrangement she never wanted, was happy. But there were things about Elias that did not fit. She noticed that he never stood with his back to a door. In any room, he positioned himself where he could see all the entrances. His eyes moved constantly, tracking movement even while he seemed relaxed. When someone approached him from behind, he always knew before they spoke. His hands were rough from gardening, but they moved with a precision that seemed wrong for a farmer. She watched him cut vegetables once and saw the knife dance through his fingers like it was part of his body. Each cut was perfect. Each movement was exactly the same as the one before. He woke from nightmares sometimes. She heard him in the night, gasping and moving in his sleep. But when she asked about it in the morning, he only smiled and said he did not remember his dreams. And there was the case, a long metal case that he kept locked in the back of their shared closet. She had asked about it once, early in their marriage. His face had gone still, and he had said only that it was something from his old life, something he hoped never to open again. She did not ask again, but she thought about it often. One night raiders came too. The syndicate had been attacking border worlds for years, taking what they wanted and killing anyone who fought back. The military was spread thin, and the estate had no real defenses. When the alarm sounded, felt cold fear flood through her body. She ran through the house, calling for the servants to hide, trying to find Elias. She needed to protect him. He was a gardener, a gentle soul who talked to plants and cried at sad stories. He would not survive against raiders. She found him in the garden. He was standing in the moonlight, very still. Around him lay 6 raiders. They were dead. Some had been cut nearly in half. Others had wounds so precise they looked surgical. The grass was wet with their blood. In Elias' hand was a sword. It was not a normal blade. It seemed to drink the moonlight, holding darkness along its edge. It looked wrong somehow, like it did not belong in this world. Elias turned to look at her. His face was calm, but his eyes were full of something she could not name. Grief, perhaps, or shame. He said, his voice was very quiet, "I am sorry, I wanted more time." She could not speak. She could only stare at the bodies, at the sword, at the man she had thought she knew. "I never lied to you," he continued. "I was a gardener. For 20 years that is all I was, but before that," he looked down at the blade in his hand, "before that I was something else." "What are you?" she whispered. He was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was tired, so tired. "My name is Elias. Humans called me the last blade. I was built for war. I ended Earth's final war. I killed generals and dictators and anyone who stood between me and peace. When the war ended, I walked away. I changed my name. I learned to grow things instead of destroy them. I tried to become human again." He looked at her and she saw the weight he carried in his eyes, the weight of all those deaths, all those years. "The Galactic Council knows what I am," he said. "They offered me to your people as a husband because they wanted a weapon hidden in plain sight, a deterrent. They did not tell you because they knew you would refuse." His legs felt weak. She sat down on the garden bench, her mind spinning. The gentle man who braided flowers into her hair, the kind soul who helped servants and told jokes. He was a killer, the worst kind of killer, a perfect machine of death wearing a human face. But even as horror filled her, she remembered other things. The way he wept at sad stories, the patience in his hands as he tended wounded plants, the loneliness in his eyes when he thought no one was watching. He was both things, the monster and the gardener, the blade and the man who wanted to be free of it. "Why did you not tell me?" she asked. "Because I wanted you to know me," he said simply. "Not what I was, just me, Elias, the man who grows tomatoes and burns soup and thinks you are the most beautiful person he has ever seen." She looked at him for a long time, the sword in his hand, the blood on the grass, the hope and fear in his eyes. "Put the sword away," she said finally, "and come inside, we need to talk." He nodded. The blade disappeared somewhere she could not see. He looked like her husband again, tired and sad and human. But she knew now. The monster was still there, sleeping just beneath the surface, and she did not know if she could love him anymore. They sat together in the small study of the estate, a room where had spent many hours reading as a child. Now it felt like a different place. Everything felt different. Elias sat across from her, his hands folded in his lap. He had washed the blood away, but she could still see it in her mind. The bodies in the garden, the sword that drank the light. "Tell me everything," she said, "from the beginning." He nodded slowly. "To understand what I am, you must first understand what humanity was." He told her about Earth, the of humans, a small blue planet that had once seemed infinite. He told her about the wars that filled human history, thousands of years of conflict over land and resources and ideas. And he told her about the final war. "We almost destroyed ourselves," he said. "The final war lasted 30 years. By the end, half of Earth was burned. Billions were dead. The old governments had fallen. Warlords and dictators ruled what remained. Humanity was dying." "What stopped it?" asked. "We did the blades." He explained that in the last desperate years of the war, a group of scientists had created something new. 17 children, grown in laboratories, modified at the genetic level. They were faster than normal humans, stronger, more resistant to pain and damage. Their minds processed information faster than computers. They could learn any fighting style in hours, master any weapon in days. They were the perfect soldiers. "We were given to the United Resistance when we were 10 years old," Elias said. His voice was flat, without emotion. "They trained us for 5 more years. Then they sent us to end the war." "You were children," said. She felt sick. "We were weapons, that is all they saw." He paused, staring at his hands. "I was the youngest, the last one created. The others called me little brother. They protected me when they could, but there was not much protection in that war." He told her about the missions, the assassinations of warlords and generals, the battles where a single blade would turn the tide against thousands, the terror that spread through enemy ranks when they learned a blade was coming. "We did not fight like soldiers," he said. "We were not meant to hold territory or win battles in the normal way. We were meant to cut off the head, find the leaders, kill them, make the enemy too afraid to fight." "And it worked." "It worked." His voice was heavy. "In 5 years, we ended a war that had burned for 30. I personally killed 3 dictators. I ended the siege of Shanghai by walking into the enemy headquarters alone and killing everyone I found. I hunted down the men who ordered the burning of South America and executed them in their beds." Listened in silence. She tried to connect the man in front of her with the monster he was describing. She could not make the pieces fit. "When the war ended, there were only 6 of us left," Elias continued. 11 blades had died in the fighting. The 6 who remained were given medals and called heroes, but we knew the truth. We were not heroes. We were nightmares given human form. "What happened to the others?" "Some could not live with what they had done. They found ways to end themselves. Some tried to become soldiers again, serving in smaller conflicts. They could not stop being what we were. The last one besides me died 8 years ago. Old age, believe it or not. We were built to last." He looked up at her. "I chose differently. After the parades and the medals, I disappeared. I changed my name. I found a quiet colony and learned to grow food. I spent 20 years trying to remember how to be human." "Did it work?" she asked softly. "Some days." He smiled, but it was a sad smile. "The things I did, they never leave. I dream about them. I remember every face, every death. But I learned to live with the memories. I learned to build instead of destroy. I thought maybe if I lived long enough I could balance the scales." Did not know what to say. She sat with the weight of his words, feeling them press down on her. "The Galactic Council," she said finally. "They knew all this when they offered you as my husband." Yes, they wanted a deterrent, a human weapon hidden in space. If any enemy learned that a blade was here, they would think twice about attacking. He paused. I agreed because I was tired of being alone, and because I hoped that maybe in a marriage arranged by politicians, I might find something real. Did you? He looked at her with naked honesty in his eyes. I found you, and you are more than I ever hoped for. Before she could respond, alarms began to sound throughout the estate. Red lights flashed in the hallway outside. Stood quickly, her heart pounding. A servant rushed in, his face pale with fear. My lady, ships have appeared in orbit. Many ships. They are broadcasting a message on all channels. They hurried to the communication room where the main screen showed a view of the space above. Counted at least 30 warships, dark and angular, hanging in formation around the planet. She recognized the design, the Dominion of. The Dominion was an empire on the far side of the galaxy, known for conquest and cruelty. They had been watching for years, waiting for a moment of weakness. It seemed they had decided the moment had come. A face appeared on the screen. A commander, gray-skinned and cold-eyed, with ritual scars covering his face. People of the commander said, we have come for the human called Elias. Our sources tell us he is a weapon of great power. We wish to test if the stories are true. Surrender him to us and we will leave your world in peace. Refuse, and we will burn your cities to ash. The message ended. The screen went dark. Turned to look at Elias. His face had changed. The gentle gardener was gone. In his place was something older and colder, something that had looked at death so many times that it no longer felt fear. They should not have come here, he said quietly. They should not have threatened you. Elias, there are 30 warships. What can one man do against that? He met her eyes. In his gaze, she saw the answer. She saw the truth that the Dominion did not yet understand. One man could do a great deal, if that man was built for war. Stay inside, he said. Keep the servants safe. This will be over soon. He walked toward the door, toward the locked case in their closet, toward the blade he had hoped never to hold again, and understood, with terrible clarity, that the quiet life they had built together was about to end. The Dominion landing ships came down like metal rain, watched from the tower window as dozens of vessels touched down across the countryside. Thousands of soldiers poured out, armed and armored, moving toward the cities and estates of. The local defense forces tried to fight. They were brave. They were outnumbered 10-1. Within hours, the resistance was crumbling. His father had already fled to the family bunker beneath the estate. Her servants huddled in the basement, afraid and praying. She should have been with them. Instead, she stood at the window, watching for Elias. He had gone to their room and opened the locked case. She had followed him, standing in the doorway as he looked at what lay inside. The blade was there, dark and terrible, but there were other things too. A black bodysuit that seemed to flow like liquid, small devices she did not recognize, and a thin strip of metal that Elias pressed against the base of his skull. When it touched his skin, he shuddered and closed his eyes. The neural link, he said, his voice tight with pain. It connects me to my implants, lets me think faster, react faster, become what I was. When he opened his eyes again, they were different, sharper, colder. The warmth she knew was still there, buried deep, but something else looked out at her now, something very old and very dangerous. He said, I need to ask you something. What? If I do this, if I become what I was, can you still love what comes back? She walked forward and took his face in her hands. His skin was warm. His eyes were full of fear, not fear of the enemy, fear of her answer. Come back to me, she said. That is all I ask, come back. He kissed her forehead gently. Then he picked up the blade and walked out of the room. That was 3 hours ago. Now waited at the window, watching the Dominion forces move across her world like a spreading disease. A group of enemy soldiers approached the estate, perhaps 50 of them, heavily armed with two armored vehicles providing support. They moved with confidence. They expected no real resistance. A single figure stepped out of the estate's front gate to meet them. Elias wore the black bodysuit now. It moved with him like a second skin. The blade hung at his side, a line of darkness against the fading light. He looked small compared to the enemy force. He looked alone. The Dominion soldiers stopped. Their commander said something, probably ordering Elias to surrender. Could not hear the words from her window. She saw Elias shake his head once. Then he moved. She had never seen anything move that fast. One moment he was standing still. The next he was among the enemy soldiers like a ghost. The blade sang through the air, leaving trails of darkness. Men fell, armor cracked, blood sprayed. The Dominion soldiers tried to shoot. Their weapons tracked too slowly. By the time they aimed at where Elias had been, he was already somewhere else. He flowed through them like water through stones, and everywhere he touched, death followed. 20 seconds, 50 soldiers. The armored vehicles exploded as Elias cut through their power cores. The commander tried to run. He made it 3 steps before the blade took him. Then silence. Elias stood alone in a field of bodies, not even breathing hard. Felt tears on her face. She did not know if they were from fear or awe or grief. Over the next hours, the pattern repeated across. Reports came in from every city, every outpost, every battlefield. A single human was cutting through the Dominion forces like fire through dry grass. Soldiers who tried to fight him died. Soldiers who tried to run died only slightly later. Nothing stopped him. Nothing even slowed him down. The who witnessed it would speak of it for generations. They described a man who did not fight so much as flow, who seemed to know where every enemy would be before they knew themselves. They spoke of plasma bolts that missed him by inches, of blades that found the gaps in power armor, of strikes so precise they seemed impossible. By midnight, the Dominion ground forces had lost 2,000 soldiers. Their commanders called for air support. Gunships descended to hunt the single human who was destroying their invasion. Elias shot them down with weapons taken from dead soldiers. When he ran out of ammunition, he threw his blade through the cockpit of a low-flying craft and brought it crashing to the ground. Then he retrieved his weapon and continued. At dawn, he reached the Dominion command ship. It was a massive vessel, landed in a valley 50 miles from the estate. 200 elite guards stood between Elias and the ship's entrance. He did not stop walking. The guards fired everything they had: plasma, projectiles, energy beams, explosives. The valley lit up with weapons fire. When the smoke cleared, Elias was still coming. His suit was torn in places. Blood ran from wounds that would have killed a normal man, but he was still coming. He reached the guards and went through them like a scythe through wheat. Bodies fell. Screams filled the air. In under a minute, the elite force was dead. Elias walked up to the command ship's main camera and spoke. His voice was calm, clear, and cold as space. "I am Elias. I am the last blade of Earth's final war. I have killed emperors and armies. I retired because I was tired of death. You have woken me." He raised his blade so the camera could see it clearly. "Leave this system now. Take your survivors and go. Tell your masters what you saw here. Tell them that this world is under my protection. If any Dominion ship ever returns to space, I will not stop at soldiers. I will I will find your leaders in their palaces. And I will teach the galaxy why humanity stopped making weapons like me." The message broadcast across the Dominion fleet. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the fleet commander sent his personal guard to kill the human. 50 of the best soldiers the Dominion had, armed with the finest weapons their empire could create. Elias killed them in 11 seconds. The fleet commander stopped sending soldiers after that. Within an hour, the Dominion ships were lifting off from. By nightfall, they had retreated through the system's jump gate. They did not come back. found Elias in the garden at dawn. He was kneeling in the dirt among his flowers, and he was weeping. His suit was gone. His wounds had been bandaged by medics who barely dared to touch him. He looked small again, human again, broken in ways that had nothing to do with his body. "I killed so many," he whispered. "So many who were just following orders. Young soldiers with families, with lives, with dreams. I killed them all." Knelt beside him in the dirt. She did not tell him that he had no choice. She did not tell him that they were the enemy, that he had saved her world, that he was a hero. She just held him. They stayed there together as the sun rose over a world saved, and a man broken, over the flowers that kept growing despite everything. The galaxy learned what had happened on. The footage spread like fire across every inhabited world. A single human walking through an army, a blade cutting through power armor like paper, a quiet voice promising destruction to anyone who threatened his home. Within days, every major power in the galaxy had seen it. Within weeks, everything began to change. The Dominion of sued for peace. Their emperor, watching the footage in his throne room, had ordered an immediate end to all expansion plans. He was not a stupid man. He knew what it meant when one soldier could defeat an invasion force. He knew what would happen if that soldier ever came for him. Other aggressive powers followed. The Syndicate stopped raiding border worlds. 3 separate rebellions quietly ended. Ambassadors who had ignored the Empire for centuries suddenly wanted to talk. The galaxy had found a new reason to be careful. Somewhere in space, there was a gardener who could end wars, but did not care about galactic politics. She cared about the man who sat in their garden every evening, staring at his hands. In the weeks after the invasion, Elias changed. He still tended his plants. He still cooked meals and helped the servants. But there was a distance in his eyes now, a weight that had not been there before. He flinched at loud noises. He spent long hours alone, and when came to find him, his eyes were often red from crying. She gave him space when he needed it. She held him when he let her. She did not try to fix him because she understood that some things could not be fixed. They could only be carried. One night she found him in their room, sitting on the bed with the blade in his hands. He was not holding it like a weapon. He was holding it like a burden. "I thought I was free of it," he said quietly. 20 years, I thought I had become someone else." Sat beside him. "You are someone else. You are still Elias, the man who grows tomatoes and talks to plants. That man killed 2,000 soldiers in one night. That man saved my world, saved me." She touched his face gently. "You are not just one thing, Elias. No one is. You are the blade and the gardener, the killer and the healer. Both are true." He leaned into her touch, closing his eyes. "How can you love something like me?" "Because you try so hard to be good," she said. "Because you carry this weight and you keep going. Because when you had to become a monster again, you wept for the men you killed." She kissed his forehead. "That is what I love, not what you can do, what you choose to be." They held each other in the darkness, and for the first time since the invasion, Elias slept without nightmares. The Galactic Council requested his presence 3 months later. They wanted him to speak about the invasion, to appear before the assembled representatives of 100 worlds. Elias did not want to go, but convinced him that his voice might do more good than his blade ever could. He stood before the council in simple clothes, looking nothing like the warrior from the footage. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but clear. "I did not come here to talk about war," he said. "I came here to talk about peace." He told them about Earth's final war, about the billions who died, the cities that burned, the world that almost ended. He told them about the blades, the children made into weapons, the cost of building something like him. "Humanity created me because we could not stop fighting," he said. "We made monsters because we did not know how to make peace. And then we used those monsters to end our war. We won. We survived, but the scars never healed." He looked out at the assembled faces. alien and human alike. After the war, I walked away. I learned to grow food. I learned to heal instead of hurt. It took me 20 years to learn how to be human again, 20 years to balance the scales even a little. He paused. Growing things is harder than killing. Peace is harder than war, but it is worth more. He spread his hands, showing them to the council. These hands can end wars. Everyone in this room knows that now, but I would rather use them to plant seeds. I would rather spend my days in the dirt, watching something grow, than spend them taking lives. He looked directly at the recording devices, knowing his words would reach every corner of the galaxy. Humanity's greatest strength is not our warriors. It is not our weapons. It is that we created monsters like me and then chose to be better. We looked at what we were capable of and decided to build something else. That is what I want the galaxy to remember, not the blade, the choice. He stepped back from the podium. The council chamber was silent. Then slowly, the applause began. 10 years passed. The estate on grew into something beautiful. Elias expanded the gardens until they covered acres, growing food and flowers that fed the entire region. Managed the business side, turning their farm into a model of sustainable agriculture that other worlds came to study. They had children, 3 of them with their mother's iridescent eyes and their father's gentle smile. The children grew up running through the gardens, learning to plant and harvest and cook. They knew their father had been something else once, something dangerous. He never hid it from them. But they also knew the man who bandaged their scraped knees and told them stories at bedtime. The blade hung above the fireplace in the main hall. It gathered dust there, untouched year after year. Visitors sometimes stared at it, knowing what it was, what it had done. Elias let them look. He was not ashamed of his past. He simply did not live there anymore. Ambassadors came to visit sometimes. Military leaders sent respectful messages. Young soldiers asked for his wisdom. He spoke with all of them, sharing whatever knowledge might help. But he never picked up the blade again. He never had to. The galaxy had learned its lesson. One evening, a dignitary from a distant world came to see the famous gardens. She was young and curious and full of questions. As she walked through the grounds she asked the question that so many visitors asked. Are you not afraid of him, your husband, knowing what he is? Looked across the garden to where Elias was kneeling in the dirt, showing their youngest child how to plant a seed. His hands were gentle. His smile was soft. He said something, and the child laughed. Fear him, smiled. He is the gentlest soul I have ever known. She looked back at the dignitary, and her eyes held the certainty of someone who had seen both the monster and the man. The galaxy fears him so that I never have to. The dignitary nodded slowly, understanding at last. She looked at the figure in the garden, the legendary weapon of Earth, and saw what had learned to see long ago. A man who had chosen to be gentle, a warrior who had chosen to plant seeds, a monster who had chosen to love. That was humanity's true strength, not the ability to destroy, the ability to change. And in the garden surrounded by flowers he had planted and family he had built, Elias had finally found peace.